Andreas Vesalius was born just before midnight on December 31st, 1514. His mother was English, his father Belgian. Andreas Vesalius came from a long line of doctors. Both his great-grandfather and grandfather were physicians. His father was a successful apothecary or druggist. It became clear that Andreas wanted to follow the family profession. Vesalius's father encouraged him. He built his son a small laboratory where Andreas could experiment. At the age of 17, Andreas Vesalius began medical studies at the University of Paris. He was a quick-thinking, confident young man. He soon tired of hearing Silvius reading aloud, hour after hour, from old books. Medicine should be more than just a matter of saying, Galen said this, and Galen said that. Why did the professors teach things that they had never tried? Because of his early reading and experimenting, Vesalius was much more advanced than the other students, and even more so than many of his teachers. He could hardly stand to watch the ignorant assistants make hasty, blundering dissections. I would learn more facts from a butcher in the meat market, he thought. Once, during a particularly bad dissection, Andreas rose in disgust, strode up to the table, and snatched up the scalpel. Skillfully he laid back the flesh and uncovered the missing organ. Vesalius resolved that when he became a doctor he would personally conduct dissections. There is only one book from which to learn about the human body, Vesalius said, and that is the human body itself. In 1536, life in Paris became difficult for foreign students. War had broken out, and Belgium was on the other side. Vesalius left Paris to study at the University of Louvain, near Brussels in Belgium. While at Louvain, he seized a chance to study the human body in more detail. Outside the city wall, he found a skeleton of a robber left hanging on a gallows. Birds had picked the bones clean. Vesalius crept outside the city wall during the dead of night and cut down the skeleton. He smuggled it into the city, a few bones at a time. Back in his room, he wired together the human skeleton. He studied it until he knew every bone, even while blindfolded. Galen taught that the breastbone had 7 segments, yet the breastbone of the skeleton had only 3 parts. How could the teacher have made such a mistake? Then Vesalius made a horrifying discovery. He compared an ape skeleton with his human skeleton. The ape's breastbone did have 7 segments. Galen had gained his information from apes. Doctors treated humans based on the description of apes. Later, in 1537, Vesalius traveled to Padua, about 20 miles from Venice, to study. Padua University was Europe's most famous school. Students ran the university. They hired their own teachers by popular vote. Because students paid the professors' salaries, they could demand the best. Professors who did poorly were asked to leave. Padua became the great scientific center of Vesalius's day. It attracted students from all over Europe. On December 5, 1537, he earned his medical degree. Although only 22 years old, the medical faculty recognized his abilities. They elected him professor of anatomy the next day. As Vesalius had promised himself, he taught anatomy by conducting each dissection himself. Other professors wondered why he wasted his time with messy, time-consuming dissections. Galen has described the human body perfectly, these professors said. Dissections serve no purpose. Students can learn anatomy just as well by reading a book. Vesalius's lectures became immensely popular. As many as 400 students crowded into the lecture hall. The popularity introduced a new problem. Most students could not see very well because of the crowd. Even a class of 20 students would be too large for everyone to see the smaller organs. Also, the corpse could not be preserved. Within a few days, it would begin to decompose. Vesalius had to work quickly. Students had little time to observe and think about what they saw. Vesalius overcame the problem by making illustrations. He drew huge charts showing the veins, arteries, and nervous systems, and hung the charts in the classroom. Students could see at a glance what would take hours to explain. His drawings were instantly successful. Students copied the drawings in hand and passed the copies along to their friends. Vesalius kept a copy of Galen's book on hand and marked changes in them. He found over 200 mistakes in the ancient books, mistakes still being taught by doctors of his day. He even found one mistake in his own teaching. Galen had taught that a network of little blood vessels existed right under the brain. Vesalius always had trouble finding that particular feature in humans, although he could locate it without difficulty in animals. During dissections, he kept the head of a sheep on hand. If he failed to locate the network at the base of the human brain, he would show his students the elusive feature in the sheep instead. One day, Vesalius once again failed to find the network of little blood vessels. He thought back to all the other dissections. Why, he'd never seen the network in a human body. As it turned out, the network occurs in some animals, but not in human beings. Now Vesalius could understand how doctors could see one thing but teach another. They had repeated Galen for so long it had blinded them to the true facts. He himself had even fallen into that trap. He decided to write a new book to correct all the errors that he had uncovered. He wanted his book to be useful. Instead of long descriptions, he would use line drawings so that the essential points could be quickly grasped. He chose John Stefan van Calcar, a young artist, to make the drawings. This met with immediate opposition by the doctors. What could an artist possibly teach a doctor? Actually, the artist of the 1500s knew far more about the human body than the doctors. Michelangelo and the other great artists studied the human body so they could paint it accurately. Medical students could learn more about the muscles of the human body from Michelangelo's figures than from medical books. Vesalius's book, On the Fabric of the Human Body, was published in 1543. This was the same year Nicholas Copernicus, the Polish astronomer, published his book correctly describing how the sun, not the earth, is the center of the solar system. It is remarkable that two such breakthroughs in science should be made in the very same year. Experts often date the start of the scientific revolution from this year, 1543. The magnificent fabric contained 663 pages and 300 beautiful illustrations. The drawings by Calcar were not only beautiful works of art, but correct as scientific drawings too. They showed that the body is fearfully and wonderfully made, as the Bible states in Psalm 139, verse 14. Vesalius's book drew fierce opposition. Doctors who had taught Galen for so long felt their reputations were at stake. They pounced upon every tiny error in the fabric of the human body, and they hotly ridiculed Vesalius. His old teacher, Sylvius, accused Vesalius of all sorts of crimes. He wrote a book against Vesalius. In it, he said, "Let no one pay attention to that ignorant man. He denies everything his deranged or feeble vision cannot locate." Scornfully, Sylvius titled his own book, "Slanders of a Madman Against Galen." He even attacked Vesalius's use of illustrations. He felt the pictures made the textbook unprofessional and even childish. After all, Galen and the other ancient physicians did not illustrate books. Galen taught solely by words. Vesalius was just 28 years old when he published Fabric. He spent his professional fortune and all of his enthusiasm on it. Eventually, his fame would be assured. It didn't happen soon enough for Vesalius personally. Being a proud and ambitious man, Vesalius became infuriated that some professors didn't instantly recognize the importance of his book. Then, when the book did gain him worldwide recognition, he became infuriated all over again when publishers pirated his book. They published parts of it without his permission and pocketed the profits. For the next 20 years, Vesalius wasted his life in quarrels defending his work. He gave up his teaching position. His medical discoveries came to a halt. He wandered over Europe. At age 50, he traveled to Jerusalem. Perhaps he hoped to regain his former drive and ambition by visiting the Holy Land. A friend met him on the road to Jericho. After that, nothing else is known for certain about Vesalius's last days. We have no official record of where he died, when he died, or where he is buried. What is left is the book on the fabric of the body. The publication of Fabric marked a turning point in the history of medicine. It is generally regarded as one of the 10 most important events in medical science.